I'll turn the podium over to the wonderful woman who has, her picture has been everywhere in Beacon Hill during these great days. Her blue eyes, her smile, it just like sparkles in every store window. So thank you for being here tonight, Patricia.
Because some of this gets me right in my throat. So those who know me well know that that's how I am. But anyway, thank you so much for it's for a tall girl.
I'm sure so.
Thank you so much for inviting me to speak. I have such wonderful memories of the Beacon Hill Civic Association from 2013 on. So as Lisa said, I've been the executive director of the Beacon Hill Civic Association for the past 8 years, and I've been involved with the Women's Forum since 2013 when I moved back to my home of Boston. But I'd love to talk about what I did before that brought me here to the Women's Forum and to the Beacon Hill Civic Association. In 1990, at the time I was living in Londonderry, New Hampshire, with my then husband and 3 children at the time. He had family connections in Puerto Rico, business connections, and we decided to move there. So there we go with 3 children under the age of 5 to a place that, you know, I didn't speak the language, my children didn't speak the language, but it was just such a vibrant and kind of crazy place. Very different from the gray days in Boston. So I fit myself in, and I learned to speak the language by immersing myself in all the opportunities I could find to learn, including the local supermarket, which is the best way to learn a foreign language, in my opinion. Okay. So 5 years went by, and another baby came along, so I had 4. I enjoyed this time of my life so much, raising my 2 daughters and my 2 sons in this unrestricted place where we were always outside, we were on the beach or in the park on any given day. But then an opportunity arose in 1997. That was the year that Princess Diana had tragically died. This is a picture, you know, of a memorial to her and Al-Fayed in Harrods that I saw when I first went to the UK for work. But the British government had placed an ad in the local newspaper in San Juan for a commercial attaché. I thought, wow, didn't know what that was. But they wanted someone to assist the British honorary consul there at the time, and a woman who was a director of trade in San Juan. I didn't want to leave my children. This is kind of a theme that has followed me all the way through my career. Because who of us really does, right? I didn't want to leave them to go back to work, but I realized that this was such an exciting opportunity. I had to try. So by this time, I spoke fluent Spanish, and I had local contacts, which were 2 things that the job required. I applied on the last day. I was dragging my feet, never thinking I would get a call, but I did, and I began work with them in November. The only thing I asked was that I be able to leave the office for a couple hours every day to go pick up my children, bring them home, and then come back to work. And they let me do that, so that was great. So I was on my way. My job began by searching for opportunities for British businesses to sell their goods or services in Puerto Rico. So think of British Petroleum or Scotch whiskey, or William Yorwood Crystal, Wedgwood China, and the next slide, please. And this is a picture of the gentleman standing to my right is the nephew of Queen Elizabeth. He's the son of Princess Margaret. His name is Viscount David Linley, and he makes beautiful cabinetry and jewelry boxes, and he does the inside of yachts, and he's just so talented. But we were able to bring him to Puerto Rico to a high-end gift shop to sell some of his smaller pieces. And then we were able to, we missed that picture. We were able to introduce Stephen Webster, and you should Google him. Stephen Webster is a famous British jewelry designer, like to the stars, and we were able to get him to Puerto Rico as well. So that was great. I also worked with large utility and infrastructure companies. Lagan International from Northern Ireland built airport runways, and Thames Water, which you see a boat of theirs there. They came to Puerto Rico and they built aqueducts all over the island because we often had water supply problems. So after they built their aqueduct, we had no more problems, so that was great. This is a boat that's on the Thames River actually, and it cleaned the river. And the river, the Thames River at one point was just so dirty, and these boats from Thames Water went through and they brought it back to a really good state. So I was also able to travel extensively during this time, and I attended many many training sessions and conferences. I was kind of in the Latin, South American, Caribbean group, so I made great friends with some people that I would go to these conferences with, all from different places. You know, I'm still in touch with many of them. And the next slide, please. Yeah, so we kind of traveled through the countryside a little bit together. And then the next slide is the gentleman was kind of my mentor through all this. He was the consul general in New York, and he really, you know, he kind of took care of me. He liked me, and he helped me really move up. So then in 2000, the director of trade that I had worked under didn't show up for work one morning, actually. She left her position with no explanation, and the honorary consul at the time also wanted to retire. So there was the position was advertised, about 50 people applied for it, but I was fortunate to get the job, and I was promoted to vice consul. And as a non-British citizen, that was the highest position I could achieve in a consular role. I became an honorary consul later, but this was the highest position I could achieve in a consulate. So we moved to a full consular office, which I helped design, because that was actually my background, was design work and architecture. And I helped design the office, which was really cool because it was built with bulletproof glass and bulletproof walls and doors, and it was really something to see it come together. So now I was the sole representation of the United Kingdom in Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. My responsibilities expanded to assist and protect UK citizens in the region, and this is when the job got really interesting. I welcome Prince Harry.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, he came, often they would come through San Juan, because they would often go to Mustique and some of the islands. And he came through, and I, had the pass to kind of walk through the airport and get out into the runway and all that. And so he sat with me, or I sat with him, for a while in an American Airlines lounge. And we were sitting, at 90 degrees from one another, and I could see people like hiding behind the bushes, the plants, trying to take pictures. And so I said to him, gosh, do you ever get tired of this, And he said, well, I always have to be on my best behavior. So we chatted or whatever. He was going from San Juan to Las Vegas, and I don't know if any of you remember the time in Las Vegas when something happened in a pool in a hotel, but that was what happened after he told me that, so I was trouble about that. I also welcomed Prince Michael of Kent, who's a cousin of the Queen, and also Prince Andrew's two daughters came separate times and together, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, which was really, really amazing. The next picture is, so I received, this is the Queen Mary, but I received Royal Navy ships and organized events on them. I organized visits for UK ambassadors to come to Puerto Rico and meet the governor and his cabinet and important local business people. So here we are in San Juan Harbor. This is the first time that Queen Mary has come in to the harbor there. The next picture is a Royal Navy warship. The Belfast is shown here in the Thames, but it did come to Puerto Rico, as did half a dozen other warships, actually. And so I had to make sure that they had all the provisions they needed. We organized events on the ships, and you probably can't read this, but I would get these, wonderful letters of appreciation from, this is a commander in the Royal Navy, so, I saved all these things. But more importantly now, I needed to respond to any situation that involved a UK citizen in some kind of distress. So the next picture, this was one of my first cases. These first citizens was a 31-year-old British man who worked on a cargo ship. He was coming through, they were transporting yachts on this cargo ship, and they were in the Caribbean. He fell off the top deck of this cargo ship and fell 30 feet below onto another deck, face down. He sustained terrible injuries and never remembered what happened to him, but he survived. I visited showtime. I visited him every day until it was safe for him to be sent back to the UK. And although he didn't remember me, he didn't remember that I was there because he lost his memory. His partner told him that I had been there for him, and he sent me an email when he was well again, a year or two later, saying how he was grateful. I also had to visit the federal prison in San Juan regularly. One of the first prisoners I had to visit was a woman who had been arrested for transporting drugs on a cruise ship. My children were young teenagers at the time, and I found myself angry at this person I didn't know and who I had to help because of what she had done and the danger that she could have brought to any child. And so, as a mother, again, that was my reaction. But I went to the prison, the first time I'd been to any place like that. What I'll never forget was the slamming of the doors behind me. Once I left my belongings with the guards, and I was allowed to enter, I had to pass through two doors, which must have each been at least 8 inches thick. And they slammed, when you had to go through one, and it slammed, and then you had to go wait in this, and then you were left to go through the other. It was really impressive. So I realized that this was serious stuff. So the guard sat me at a table in the cafeteria, all the furniture, I don't know if anyone's ever been to a prison before, but all the furniture is attached to the floor, and there's somebody who's able to see everything that's going on. This guard who's everything is in his eye shot. And this is also where the lawyers would come to visit prisoners. It's not where family would come. It was a different place. So I waited quite nervously. And finally, a gray-haired woman was escorted into this large room and brought to my table. I had a vision of what she would look like and be like, and she was none of that. My preconceptions were wrong, and after speaking with her for a while, I asked her, "What do you need?" And she answered, "Baby powder and Tampax." And I realized she was a woman just like me, but someone who did not have the opportunities I had had in my life. This was another moment that I will never forget. I went to that prison many times after that to sit with prisoners who had done really terrible things. But I tried to keep my professionalism, my listening skills, and empathy front and center so that I could make it through each visit. Soon thereafter, I had a case of a young couple who were on a flight to the Dominican Republic from the UK with their 18-month-old child. They were taking him to the Dominican Republic for a treatment he could not get in the UK for a life-threatening illness that he had. Sadly, the child died on the plane before reaching DR, and the flight was diverted to San Juan. So this case, again, particularly sad. as a mother, I found it very hard. And I still can see it in my mind. I accompanied the parents to the morgue. They couldn't have been more than 20, 21 years old, both of them. They didn't speak Spanish. I had to take them to the morgue where the staff did not speak English. And they had to identify their child's body. So I was there to translate and to try to comfort them. I accompanied them to the funeral home after while they selected, this little coffin. And I worked with the funeral home to let me know what their plans were to prepare this child for their return to the UK. So through those next years, I had many demanding consular cases, to say the least. And at one point, I had 2 cases in one hospital. One woman who had fallen she was on a cruise and she'd fallen and suffered brain damage. She was brought to San Juan because we had the best hospitals in the Caribbean at that time. And another man who'd been assaulted in Puerto Rico and had been left by the side of the road, and he needed his jaw wired, and he communicated with me when I went to see him every day by writing notes. So that was another one that was, I have goosebumps right now. But the most challenging case was about to enter that same hospital. As often happened, older British couples would come celebrate their anniversary or other important events on a cruise in the Caribbean. In this case, there was a couple, the gentleman became unwell on board, and the cruise ship was rerouted to San Juan. He and his wife were rushed to the same hospital where I was at the time. So I went from one case's floor to another to meet the woman. She was a lovely lady from Sheffield in the UK. And if anyone has been to that area, it's in Yorkshire. It's a beautiful place. It's a very strong accent. So here I am in Puerto Rico. I speak Spanish, but not many people speak English, let alone are able to understand someone with such a heavy, difficult accent. But her name was Sylvia. I had to leave after I met her for half an hour. One of my daughters was coming back to BC, and I had to take her to the airport. I was gone half an hour. By the time I went back to the hospital, I couldn't find her. I asked for her and was gruffly told in Spanish that she was over there, with her husband who died. So now I'm really, so many things rushed through my head in that split second. I had to enter this cubicle where she was with him. I had to face a grief-stricken woman who would rely on me for almost everything for the next 2 weeks. And I had to face the thing I most feared, which was to see a recently deceased person that I had never seen. I've been to funerals and all that, but it's not the same. So that is something that has never left me. But I had, again, to gather my strength and go in, and once I saw him, I immediately knew that I had to turn all my attention to her. So I got over that hump, really, of that fear of seeing this gentleman, and I just said, okay, I've been there, I've seen that, okay, now I have to help her. So the next days were full of insurance issues back with the UK, with, many flight, all kinds of complications, visit to the local morgue, calls with the funeral home, and making sure that Sylvia had a good place to stay and rest. For the doctors, though, the nurses and the morgue staff, the funeral home directors, this was a typical case, and all in a day's work. Puerto Rico has so many tourists, these things happen. But for me, this was different, and it was the most important thing I'd ever dealt with. The goal was to get Sylvia on a plane home and her husband's body on that same plane, and in good enough shape for his only son in Sheffield to see him when he arrived. So I went to the funeral home one day with Sylvia, and the funeral home director told me in Spanish, "He's green." So I panicked, and I said, you have to do better. He has one son who couldn't make it here, and he has to be able to see his father. What had happened was, of course, Puerto Rico was like 95 degrees every day, and the poor man was went from the hospital to this and to that and was, was not properly taking care of things beyond my reach. So I let them know that they just had to do better. Thankfully, Sylvia did not understand, and I could not find the way to tell her. So I just had faith that the funeral home company would do the best job they could. Ultimately, we were able to get help from their insurance company, and the day finally came when Sylvia could accompany her husband on the long, sad journey home. I cried for her then. We both cried. We formed such a bond during those difficult 2 weeks. And I still cry when she writes to me by letter or lately on Facebook, saying that she could not have managed without me. So I think now we have a picture of Sylvia and I. I went to see her in London in 2005, and we spent the weekend going all over, and it was wonderful. But one day, a CD arrived in the mail from her, a CD, back in those days. And it was a recording of a British game show. I'm sure there's very similar ones here in the US, I don't know what the name would be, but her son was a contestant. And by this time, he was probably 45 years old. The game show host asked him what he would do with all that money if he won. And he responded, well, I'd go to Puerto Rico to bring flowers and say thank you to a wonderful woman.
Oh, wow.
So that was on, British TV, so that's just too much. Anyway, a short time later, Sylvia wrote to her minister in Parliament. I mean, this is what people can do there if they have an issue that they want attended to or something important, they write to their minister. And she wrote about me. And that letter went then through the system, and it arrived to my consul general's office at the time. That's him in the middle, and on his left, it was my assistant at the time, Brianna, who's like a daughter to me. So anyway, Consul General Bates let me know that I would have to travel to the British Embassy in Washington in September of 2006 to receive an award given to me by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II for my consular and trade work. This was just beyond anything I could ever have imagined. The award I was to receive was called an MBE, or a member of the British Empire. And for some background on that, the most excellent order of the British Empire, as it's called, was founded in 1917, initially to recognize service by civilians in the First World War. This award now honors civilians and service personnel for public service and outstanding contribution to society. British honors are awarded on merit for exceptional achievement or service. These awards are conferred by the Queen, or now King, on the advice of the Foreign Secretary, on those who have made an important contribution to relations between their country and Britain. As a non-British citizen, it would be different for me. My award is honorary, because not many people that are not British get this award. And also, only British people can receive the award in the UK at Buckingham Palace from the Queen or from Prince Charles or now Prince William. So I received my award that day in front of my family from Sir David Manning, that this lists what was going to happen. And here I am with two gentlemen who were getting an OBE, which is the Order of the British Empire. And there I am down there. And these two gentlemen, I don't remember which is which now, but one of them was working on a peace plan for Northern Ireland, and the other was working on a cure for AIDS. And I'm saying to myself, I don't know. Yeah, it was just more than I could really absorb. So here, the next picture will show that there I am in the embassy. Sir David Manning is at the podium in the middle, and the other two gentlemen who were receiving an award, one's in a wheelchair and one is next to him. And I'm standing there at attention, waiting. The next picture will show me walking up, and there's my award, and here it is. I'm ready to show you. Just amazing. And the next picture, Sir David is a knight. You know, he has multiple medals. You know, he was the ambassador to the U.S. from 2003 to 2007, and he's called a Knight of the Grand Cross and a Knight Commander. That's the highest you can go. When he finished in 2007, he became like an advisor to Prince William and Catherine. So that was these wonderful, wonderful men. I relinquished my role in Puerto Rico in 2013, sadly. And then I have this is my proclamation. So I have it at home. It's signed by the Queen above in blue ink and by Prince Philip below. So it's something that I treasure and I keep on the wall, but out of sunlight. So the next picture, I think there's a one before this, maybe, Jane? No? Okay. Well, anyway, in 2013, I decided I had to come back to my home here in Boston. My mother had passed away. My sister, who was a year and a half older than I, had been battling cancer for many years, and I knew she needed me, so I couldn't look back, but I was sad to leave such a fulfilling role, and you know, it was hard, but I knew I had to come home. So being back again in Boston after so many years, I wanted to find an organization where I could meet local people and connect for friendship and opportunities. That brought me here to the Women's Forum. And this picture, while it's not a great picture, it shows, there's so many women in that picture that are my dear friends today, namely Susan Corthals, yes, and so many others. They've become lifelong friends for me. But like Lisa said, at the end of, it was a December Women's Forum meeting in 2015, Lisa closed the meeting by saying that the Beacon Hill Civic Association was looking for an executive director, and I did sneak out. And I went home and I applied that same night. And for those who might not know, the mission of the Beacon Hill Civic Association is to preserve and protect the historic and residential nature of this special neighborhood. I thought that the BHCA would be a perfect place to put my experience to use. So I was hired soon thereafter and began my work there in January of 2016. So now, with 8 years done, I'm proud of what I've been able to accomplish for this neighborhood, and I'm still motivated and challenged with the ever-present challenges of historic preservation and the aging infrastructure of an almost 300-year-old neighborhood. And so although my role at the BHCA might not be as glamorous as my consular role was at times, I know that the issues our neighborhood faces can be solved with the same professionalism and empathy that carried me through those 17 years, and I'm so grateful for all of it. Thank you. I would like to answer questions if anyone has any.
Yes. I cannot believe, I'm so touched by living that life of service is so deep. Like, that service is beyond the call of duty. So it's so incredible to have you tonight.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so
It's
much.
amazing.
So Patricia, we're so delighted to have you here, and what an amazing backstory to share with us. When you came here, what did you feel was your big takeaway from those years in San Juan that you carried through here, right?
Mm-hmm. That I wanted to be of service somehow, for sure. I mean,
Different location, same
the
ethic.
same kind of thing. You know, frankly, I thought of working at the British consulate here across the river. They are very focused on biotech, pharma, you know, and you have to be a specialist in one of those fields. And I was a generalist because I went through I did so many different things that, I really was a generalist. So that's really that was so fulfilling to me, those years. And I knew that I had to do something similar to that, That's what I really wanted to do.
I have a question. Are there any challenges that you're seeing now that you weren't seeing when you started your role at BHCA, specific to perhaps the pandemic and or climate change?
Yes.
That we should be aware of?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think certainly I have seen a lot over those 8 years, and COVID really did change people's desire to volunteer and desire to kind of look out their front door and take care of where they live or where they work. So, we have a really big problem with trash. It's as simple as that. And, as far as climate change, we have restrictions on the neighborhood, architectural restrictions, because we're a historic neighborhood. There are guidelines that have to be followed. And for example, solar panels aren't in those guidelines or that kind of thing. So, we're kind of in a little bubble in Boston, but kind of in a little bubble where we might not be able to deal with some of those climate change issues as other, as the waterfront or as the seaport could, because we don't have new construction, There are things that are done with the water table, and, when you renovate, you have to make sure that the water that you collect, in your gutter or whatever goes back into the water table, so that's one thing that happens. But generally, yes, I mean, I feel it is kind of exhausting, honestly, sometimes. I live on Pinckney Street, so I walk up to work. Sometimes I take the hill. Sometimes if I want to be with my thoughts, I take Star Drive. But usually I end up on Cambridge Street. And I get to my office and I feel so discouraged. I have an e-blast that goes out, and if anybody wants my card that wants to get involved, I have it with me. But I send out an e-newsletter every Friday, and we're constantly trying to tell people, this is how you should put out your trash, and this is why your dog shouldn't pee on the tree, and I mean, like I said, it's not as glamorous, but it's a question. It's a question of trying to, I don't know if educate is the right word, but getting the message out there, and I just feel that people are just not as involved. We're trying. I think that we're seeing maybe the end of that, and we have neighborhood cleanups, and I'm trying to get the young friends, like Rochelle's doing a great job with our young friends group, because they're very civically minded, and so we're trying to get them really involved to be the next group of people that are going to help us achieve what we need to achieve. And so I hope that answers your question. Hi.
Did your children enjoy living in Puerto Rico?
Yes.
Did any of them follow in your footsteps, sort of?
Well, no, but we have an interesting story with that. So my children are 39, 35, 34, and 29. The 2 boys came last and the girls came first, which was very kind of God. But my eldest daughter wanted to be here tonight, but she couldn't. She's a teacher, and she's pretty much with her 10-year-old daughter all the time. She married a man from Lebanon. So we have this wonderful family of people from everywhere. My second daughter, and actually my older daughter lived in Barcelona for a while after she left Puerto Rico. My second daughter, they all studied in Puerto Rico to the end, and my second daughter went to BC, and she took a semester abroad in Venice. She ended up going back to Venice the day after she graduated, because she had met someone. So her husband is a gentleman from Albania, who she met. He worked in Venice, and they have a couple of children. And then my sons are both chefs. So when COVID came, they said, we can't stay around here. Everything's closed, and it's, So they said, let's go back to Puerto Rico, where everyone's always eating and drinking and having fun, even with COVID, because everything's outside. So they went back and they each worked in their own thing for a while, but then my older son opened a restaurant in San Juan, and so his brother and he worked side by side, and they have been crazy successful, and have come out in the New York Times and everything, so it's really, really a proud thing for me. And what makes me proud is that this job I had in Puerto Rico, I had my BlackBerry 24 hours a day. I was, on call always, and I had to travel a lot, and my kids were so proud of me that they really just, gave me the strength to keep going, and that's why, like any mother, right? But they're just the thread. They're in everything I do. So now I have 4 grandchildren, so they're in everything I do. So, yeah. Anybody else? Thank you so much.
We would like to present, it should be